how about your New York Mets bringing out the brooms in Washington before they head off to London? We'll talk about it all on today's show.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're listening to Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. Locked On Mets is free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. On today's show, we are going to talk about the Mets sweeping the Washington Nationals in the first segment. In the second segment, I want to talk about the new catcher that has burst onto the scene in Luis Torrens. Will he grab Tomas Nido's job? And also, Jeff McNeil did not play in this entire series sweep. Is that a sign of more things to come? We'll go through those things. And then finally, in the last segment, I want to ask you all, do you want to see the Mets contend this year, or are you still bought in to the Mets selling at the deadline? We'll go through all of it, but before we do, I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. You can also find semi-writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Well, this was the first time the New York Mets swept the series since April 15th to April 17th when they beat up on the Pittsburgh Pirates. Although they did sweep a series, technically, against the Cardinals at the beginning of May, but that was a two-game set where the final game got rained out, and honestly, it sort of looked like that was going to happen again. The Mets winning the first two games, then the final game getting rained out. I'll tell you, I've been in D.C. this whole time, so first off, you're welcome. I was at the first two games. We really planned it out kind of around this rain. We sort of had an idea that the third game might get rained out, so our plan the whole time was go to the first two games, my dad and I. And then also, for those of you who don't know, we were here for my dad's birthday, which was the first game of this series. My mom's birthday is tomorrow, or as you're listening to this today, June 6th. And typically she does not go on Mets road trips with us, but my parents are snowbirds now. They live in South Florida during the year. My sister lives in Chicago, so they spend the summers out there with her husband, and now their two grandkids. So this is the first time where it sort of made sense to have my mom come with us because they were driving up north. They met me in D.C. I flew out, and then they're going to drive to Chicago tomorrow. So the point is, first time ever my mom has been on a baseball road trip. And I'll tell you what, good luck charm. The Mets win all three games. But because it's her birthday on Thursday here, we decided to make sure she got some time with me before she heads off for a couple months. And we decided that we were not going to go to the game today. So this was the first time we weren't in the ballpark for it, but we were in the city. And what a game. I mean, you thought the Mets were going to win this one, right? I talked about it on yesterday's show. To have Luis Severino going up against Patrick Corbin, you should win that game. Like, the Mets score 8 runs. That's what should have happened. But because it's the Mets, and we've seen this team throughout the year, you didn't have that complete confidence, and I feel great to know the Mets did what they should have done. Luis Torrens, which we're going to talk about more in the next segment, what a game for him. He homers off of Corbin the top of the third inning. Top of the fifth inning, Tyrone Taylor, who was only in the game because Starlin Marte got scratched, and whenever that happens, you always look at the guy in the lineup that gets inserted late and you say, he's going to do something, right? Here it was, Tyrone Taylor with a triple. He scores on a sac fly from Harrison Bader. Mets up 2-0. We're feeling good. Then the sixth inning, we're all feeling great. The Mets completely broke the game open. Torrens, another home run. Francisco Lindor makes it back-to-back homers. Alonso doubles. JD Martinez singles. Mark Vientos singles in Pete Alonso. Then Harrison Bader doubles in JD Martinez and Mark Vientos. Jose Iglesias singles in Harrison Bader. It's a 6-run inning, and everyone is just on cloud 9. The Mets tack on another run in the 7th inning. Meanwhile, Luis Severino was exceptional. Did what he's supposed to do against a bad team. He kept the pitch count low. He got through 8 innings, which is just really impressive for any Mets starter this year. And Sevy continues to prove that he's the Mets ace. So he goes 8 strong, allows just 1 run on 7 hits, did not walk a batter, struck out 4. Danny Young with a scoreless 9th, and here are your New York Mets winning the game and sweeping the series. Every single hitter in the starting lineup got a hit in this one. It was just a great series in Washington, and to me, it's an important one because you look at the division right now. The Marlins, they have been playing better since May, but they're not going to be in this race. We know that. The Phillies and the Braves are at a different echelon. But the New York Mets should be the clear third best team in this division. It shouldn't even be a contest. And yet throughout the early parts of this season, the Nationals have been right there with the New York Mets. And so I think this was a great series, for one, to send a message that they're not in the same league as the Nationals. The Nationals are another tier. And when you watch these teams up close, as I have throughout this series, the talent discrepancy is huge. Particularly in the starting lineup. You know, the Nationals are running out there Joey Gallo and Jesse Winker, guys that are hanging on to their major league lives as starters, playing on bad teams to give themselves opportunities, but guys that shouldn't be starting in the big leagues anymore. And the Mets, while you might knock some of the guys in the starting lineup at times, they don't have any of that. Like, as bad as Jeff McNeil has been this year, if you polled 30 GMs in Major League Baseball, who would you rather have, Jeff McNeil, contract aside, or Jesse Winker or Joey Gallo, that's coming up 100% Jeff McNeil, and he is right now probably the worst starting player on the Mets. Now granted, he didn't start any games in this series, but the point being, the Nationals are not in the same league as the New York Mets. They shouldn't be, at least. Last month, they were, but now you're seeing the Mets create that separation, and so that was a big thing for them to just show that they're not in the same conversation. They are a team that can contend for the playoffs this year. The Nationals, they can't. So that was a good part of it. Now, on top of that, you have the fact that this is a Mets team that needed to really prove that players' meaning meant something. That this was a team that turned over a new leaf. And when they split that series against Arizona instead of winning it, you could have your doubts. But guess what? Now they have won 5 of their last 7 games. And they carry momentum with them to London, which is huge because that London series, there's going to be a lot of eyeballs on the Mets, and we'll see how they fare. I mean, the Phillies are a great team, but if you win one game, or you never know, crazy things happen. If you end up winning both, all of a sudden, everyone's looking at the New York Mets a little bit differently, and I think that's a really big thing because you got 2 travel days right now where the Mets are going to head over, and they can feel good about themselves experiencing this journey together. I'm glad that Brett Beatty is going to be on the trip. The Mets are allowed to have a 27th man, so Beatty is coming along the ride. Cole Sulser to give them an extra arm in the bullpen, also part of the travel party. And there's a third-string catcher that his name escapes me, that they just picked up and added to the 40-man roster and optioned him in Syracuse. That is also a part of it. But the bottom line, this is a Mets team that has much better vibes right now, and I'm looking forward to seeing what they can do throughout the rest of this month. Their work is still cut out for them, but they're in so much of a better spot than they were a week ago. And now moving forward, let's see how they are able to hold up and maybe maintain this. Because as crazy as it is to look at this Mets team and call them contenders, the wild card's not getting away from anybody. So we'll talk about that in the next segment. Also, will Luis Torrens end up being the backup catcher over Tomas Nido? And how much will Jeff McNeil and Jose Iglesias split up time moving forward? What's that going to look like? I'll talk about all of it in just a minute. First, though, a word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is America's #1 fantasy sports app with more than 3 million members. It is the easiest and most exciting way to get in on the action while you watch your favorite sports and players. You just pick more or less on 2 or more player stats, and you watch the winnings roll in. So when the Mets get out to London, you can look at, let's think, who's going to start these games? Sean Manaea should start the first one, I believe. You can look at his strikeouts, pick more or less, or Francisco Lindor has been red hot out of that leadoff spot. You can look at his fantasy score as a potential option, or his hits, maybe his home runs, whatever it is. You pick more or less there. Also, right now, you got the NBA Finals tipping off. You got the Stanley Cup Finals. You can go across sports. So you could take a player on the Mets, combine them with the player in the NBA Finals, and also, if a game is playing on the same day, combine them with the player in the Stanley Cup Finals. All of it on one entry with PrizePicks. PrizePicks has something for every sports fan, from baseball to basketball to League of Legends and everything in between. With quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and an enormous selection of players and stat types to choose from, PrizePicks is the #1 fantasy sports app. PrizePicks also offers weekly promotions and special offers for the biggest moments in sports. Download the PrizePicks app today. Use the code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, download the PrizePicks app today. Use the code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. So as the dust has settled after this series, and as I'm recording this at about midnight, the Mets are sitting 4 games back in the wild card race. Everything is still in front of them. Yes, they got to climb to 500 first. Right now, the third wild card team is the Cubs, sitting at exactly 500. That's the first hurdle. But you can start to believe in this team a little bit, and I'm excited to see how they can build off of this because there's still time. And we'll talk about this in the next segment. What do you want to see out of this Mets season? But it's not time to really focus on the deadline. Yes, we're going to continue to talk about it because it's sort of the elephant in the room. You want to see, though, if this team can contend. And right now, there's nothing to do but let these guys run out there each day and try to get into this race. So to see them sweep a series, that's awesome. Can they carry it over? Can they win in London? Can they beat the Marlins when they face the Marlins at home after the London series? They do have an opportunity here to really build off this and get themselves back into the conversation. So I really like what I've seen. Now, let's talk about Luis Torrens, because as I discussed when this happened, I think there were some Mets fans that said, why are you doing this to Omar Narvaez? Francisco Alvarez is going to be back, and he's going to be back soon, which is true. He should be back as soon as the Mets return from the London series. With that said, at the time I said, look, if Luis Torrens wins you some ball games in the meantime, it's worth it. Well, look at this series. Has a huge double to help the Mets win the first game. And then tonight, back-to-back home runs. Well, not back-to-back at bats, but yeah, I mean, and then he did go back-to-back with Lindor. Torrens has been a huge lift to this team, and it does make you wonder what will they do with Tomas Nido and Torrens when they have to make that decision. I thought for sure Nido was safe, and he might still be. But you also have to consider that maybe Torrens is better. I'd have to dive into the numbers a little bit more to tell you who's the better defensive catcher. But so far, it does look like Torrens is pretty strong. He's thrown out some runners. It looks like his pitch framing is pretty solid. And he looks great in the box. With that said, Tomas Nido has been really good offensively. So I think it's a tough decision the Mets are going to have when they have to make a move there between the two of them. If they wanted to kick the can down the road, they could. The more and more that I'm watching this team play, I'm looking at DJ Stewart, and I'm thinking, what exactly is his role on this team? Could you remove DJ Stewart and have a different player make up that spot on the bench? Probably. Honestly, he has an option. He hasn't been hitting well since he's gotten limited playing time. So maybe that's the move you make. But do you want 3 catchers? I sort of doubt it. I could instead see a situation where Brett Baty comes back for DJ Stewart, which we've talked about this week. And then Baty gives you a compliment to Vientos at third. Maybe in the meantime, while he's still in Syracuse, you play with his positional flexibility so he can go out and play some left field or second base, whatever it is, to give you another option at those spots. And it allows you to just make the team better, because I think on the absolute surface, if you were to tell me who is a better baseball player right now on your roster, is it DJ Stewart or Brett Baty, I would pick Brett Baty. But at the same time, I could see the argument for keeping the 3 catchers, because that would allow you to have Francisco Alvarez, be able to come off the bench and pinch hit when he's not starting and not have to worry about it. Or have him DH a little bit, even though JD Martinez is pretty much soaking up all those at-bats. So I don't think they'll go that route. I really do believe this is heading towards a decision when Alvarez comes back. Will it be Torrens? Will it be Nido? And I don't know which way to go with it. Now, I will say, hitting 2 home runs off Patrick Corbin is not the greatest of feats. It's amazing that he had such a good series, but I don't know if that alone wins you the job. it's really going to come down to what the Mets feel is best moving forward. Who is the best defensive catcher and who's going to give you the most offensively off the bench. And it might be Torrens. The thing I love about the David Stearns regime right now is they're not sentimental. Okay, just because Tomas Nido has been with the Mets forever and has a contract locked in, that does not mean he gets the job. Just because Jeff McNeil is making $10+ million and still has a contract for a couple of years does not mean that he starts over Jose Iglesias. It was working with Iglesias in this series. The Mets faced nothing but lefties, and they just rode the hot hand the whole way through. And they won the series, and they swept the series. So I like that aspect of it, and I'm very curious how the playing time is going to shake out moving forward. In this upcoming series, when it comes to the catcher spot, I imagine Torrens starts a game and Nido starts a game. When it comes to second base, I had to see who's starting for the Phillies, and we got plenty of time before the next game to preview that. I'll probably preview that series on Friday, but the point stands that if you look at where the Mets are and how they have to shake this out, it could be Iglesias starting one of these games, even if it's two righties, because he's playing well and the team is responding to having him in the starting lineup, and I love that. I love that the Mets aren't just going to start Jeff McNeil because of the contract. And I think because of that, the next time Jeff McNeil gets out there, you might see even more of a chip on his shoulder to finally come through. Sometimes internal competition breeds the best out of everybody. So I like where the Mets are on that front as well. So now you look at this upcoming series and you try to see what the Mets can do. Can they compete with the Phillies, a team that has arguably been the best in the National League this year? I still think they can. I look up and down that lineup. Can the Mets score runs on anybody? I believe they can. Do they have a good enough rotation? Can they throw a couple of solid starting pitchers out there? Most likely. If Jose Quintana gets to start, I'm a little less confident. I'm still a little bit apprehensive about the bullpen, which I talked about on yesterday's show. But we'll see what happens. We'll see how they continue to evolve over time. And now you get a full reset with a couple of days for all of these guys to get fresh for that series. If the Mets can win one in London, return home and have a good homestand, we're going to be talking a lot different about this team in a couple weeks here. And I'm excited to see if they can build off of this because it has been so much fun to see the Mets win some games again. And especially this last one, to win one carefree. That's what I was complaining about the last two nights doing these shows in D.C. here. I walked out of the ballpark for the first two games of this series, and because of the ninth inning in the first game where the game very nearly got away, to the second game where it was still a 3-run lead, but it got dicey and the tying run came up and all of it happened there where it made you really stress. I was waiting for the Mets win where there was never a doubt, and that's what we got today. So can they build off that moving forward? And what do Mets fans want? Do you want to see this team contend this year and be a wild card hopeful? Or would you rather them go the other way because you're solely focused on 25 and 26 and you believe this is the time to trade Pete Alonso and Luis Severino and Sean Manaea and JD Martinez and any reliever that can get you any value at the deadline to continue to add key prospects to this farm system and look ahead? So that's what we're going to talk about next. What do you want out of this Mets season? I'll talk about it first, though, a word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. It is the app I relied on this baseball road trip where we were able to get great seats to Mets Nationals for the first couple games of this series. What I love about Game Time is they have so many features that take all the guesswork out of the process. So for one, you can click on a button that'll give you all-in pricing. So when you're looking across the stadium to find your seats, you can have the tax, the fees, all factored right in there. So if you see a seat's $45 and you're trying to get to, you know it's only going to cost you $90 when you check out. That's really a huge benefit. Also, the second game, we took advantage of zone deals. So zone deals is where they will take 3 sections and they'll tell you, are you going to get some seats in those 3 sections, and by taking a zone deal, you get 20% off. So that's how we got into the ballpark for $68 for our 2 tickets for great seats with Game Time. If you want to buy tickets to any Mets game this year, you want to use Game Time. Game Time, again, will take all the guesswork out. They'll show you all in pricing up front. You can buy tickets in seconds with 2 taps. then you're all set. Download the Game Time app today. Use the code LOCKEDONMLB. You're going to get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. If you are an everyday listener to the show, make sure you become a Locked On Mets insider. This is our texting service where you can reach out anytime via text to ask me questions, to just comment on what's going on with the Mets. You can get updates from me anytime some news breaks. You also get these starting 9 graphics sent to your phone each day, and you can take part in our Locked On Mets signed photo giveaways. So if you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find the link in the episode description or go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. What do you want to happen as a Mets fan this year? Would you rather see this team contend, or do you want them to sell? I'll be throwing this up as a poll on YouTube today, so make sure you vote on that. But it really is an interesting thought exercise. And I think for me, the answer is simple. I like how I've felt the last 3 days compared to how I've felt for the past month. I want to see the Mets win. I'm a Mets fan. I root for the Mets to win baseball games. It's that simple to me. Now you could say this team has no chance to win the World Series. But if you talked about the Diamondbacks last year at this time of year, you would have said the same thing. If you talked about the Phillies 2 years ago at this time, you would have said the same thing. Heck, if you talked about the Padres 2 years ago at this time, you would have said the same thing. The Padres and the Phillies met in the NLCS in 2022. The Diamondbacks and the Phillies met in the NLCS last year, and the Diamondbacks pulled off the upset and advanced to the World Series. Anything can happen in October. That's not me trying to sell you on the Mets winning the World Series this year. But instead, it's a matter of get there. If you can get there, get there. And the National League is wide open. Now, I understand the other argument. If you believe the Mets are not going to win until 2025 and 2026, yes, you could say this is the perfect time to sell. I did a whole podcast on that, why the New York Mets were built to sell, something along those lines. I did it a couple weeks ago. I think it was actually were the 2024 New York Mets built to sell. You can listen to my thoughts on it, how the Mets have a roster that would be very easy to flip and sell, what that would mean to the farm system. And while I don't believe there is a single prospect this year, a single piece that's going to bring you as big of a prospect as what they had last year with Verlander and Scherzer, I don't think they have quite the same trade assets. They were able to flip Tommy Pham and turn him into Jeremy Rodriguez, who's a really good prospect right now in the Florida Complex League. Could be a top 10 guy by the end of the year. So if you scout properly, if you make smart trades, you can still hit on any and all of those deals. And I still understand the merit of going that route. I almost would prefer if the Mets selectively sold. If you're in the mix, but you can trade Severino for a big prospect and then replace him with Jose Budo, to me that's a win. If you can trade JD Martinez, get a piece back, and start Mark Vientos and Brett Beatty together, that is a win. But if you were to, again, look at the general question instead of simple individual cases, you said at large, what would you prefer? The Mets to be in it or to be out of it and sell? I want them in it. I want to see this Mets team compete and have a chance, because you know what? If you get in and at that point Kodai Senga is pitching and you have a hot Kodai Senga and a Luis Severino, you never know what's going to happen. Who knows? Maybe at that stage of the season you got Christian Scott pitching still as a starter and Brandon Sproat is some relief ace out of the bullpen. You don't know where the Mets are going to be. But I think they have enough talent that it's worth it to be rooting for them to compete, because they could get to a point where this ends up being a great season, which is shocking to say considering all the turmoil. But no one is running away with this league. There's 3 spots available for the wild card, and a 500 team might make it. So yes, the Mets still have their work cut out for them. They have to get back to 500. That is step 1. But do I believe in the New York Mets now all of a sudden? I'm buying in. They still have to prove a lot. But do I think there's a chance that all of this is legit and they can sustain this? I do believe that. And as much as I can look at the long-term view, I could say, man, just get as many pieces that can help you in the next couple years beyond this season. Trade for expirings, all that stuff. Do I want to see the Mets do that? No, I don't. To me, the Arizona Diamondbacks proved last year that you don't need to have a juggernaut team that has won 100 games in the regular season to make a run. And making a run to the NLCS, the World Series, would be so much fun for this fan base. I want to see them in the mix. And I might not share that opinion with everybody. I can see a lot of you saying, man, this team is just not going to win at all. And I concede that. I don't believe the Mets this year are going to win the World Series. But would I rather sign up for an 88-win season where the Mets are the second or third wildcard team, they win that round, they end up in the NLDS before they get bounced by the Braves or the Phillies? But I'd rather see all that play out than just sit here and do mock trades for the next 2 months, see the Mets make some moves at the deadline, and that's their season. I want 6 full months of good baseball, and right now, here we are in June, I want 4 more. I do. And I'm starting to believe the Mets can give it to me, and that's an exciting thing. But it's also the Nationals and the Diamondbacks that they've won these games against. Playing in London, that's a big measuring stick series where the Mets can see just how good they are. At this point in time, early in June, I want to see the Mets win. And I'm very curious how you all feel about it. Are you still more all in on a sell than a team that's going to try to fight and stay in the hunt this year? I'd be very curious to get your response on that poll on YouTube. So again, I'll make sure I schedule that. I appreciate all of you for tuning in throughout my road trip here. Going to be hopping on a bird tomorrow, flying home, and we got a couple off days. So I'll see exactly what I'm going to cover. I'm definitely going to talk some prospects for our Friday Farm Report. I'll probably preview the London series for a Saturday show. In between what I'm going to do tomorrow, I'm not entirely sure. I might even do an updated top 10 Mets prospect list on Friday. So I got a lot of ideas in my head. As I make my journey back home, I'll sort of scope out the rest of the week and make some decisions. And as always, I'll be back with another show every morning throughout the rest of this week. I appreciate all of you who continue to tune in. I also want to give a shout out to the different listeners of the show that I met throughout this week. Colin, Ethan, and Gerard. Awesome to see you all in D.C. We had a lot of fun on this baseball road trip. So far in the history of Locked On Mets, my dad and I have done Cincinnati and Pittsburgh. We did Kansas City at one point. And this one, first one we've done in a couple of years because I had a busy amount of time in my personal life when it came to getting married and all that stuff. That it has been a little over a year since we've done one. I'm looking forward to the next one with my dad. And it went so well that, I don't know, Mets, Braves later this year, there's a chance that we actually try to squeeze another one out of this season. I appreciate, again, all of you who've tuned in throughout this journey this week. And like I said, I'll be back for another show tomorrow morning. As always, if you're listening on the audio side, follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. Watch it on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button. Trying to make a push to 9,000 subs. So I appreciate all of you who continue to subscribe. You can follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find the link in the episode description or go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen or your first watch every day. Now, for your second watch, head over and check out the first ever 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube that covers everything in the world of sports. Of course, I'm talking about Locked On Sports Today, which is also streaming 24/7 on Amazon Fire TV.